Yakuza 0. Man, what a game. I initially reviewed Yakuza 0 back in January of 2017, and it became one of the best games I played that year, and was my personal game of the year. Now, fast forward to summer of 2018, and here we are again with the Yakuza series making its debut on PC. Between the initial release and now, I have put in well over 200 hours into Yakuza 0 on the PlayStation 4, and I'm looking to make that leap again into the PC version. So with a new perspective on the game and a new platform, let's take a dive and review Yakuza 0 once again as a cool celebration of my 100th review. One half of the entire Yakuza experience would have to be the gameplay. Yakuza 0's combat system was a great departure from that of Yakuza 5's, whereas each character only had one combat style to use in that game. In Yakuza 0, both Kiryu and Majima have 3 different fighting styles to use that you can switch between on the fly. Each of these combat systems are extremely viable for different situations, where one may be good with one-on-one fights, another may be best for dealing with crowd control, while another one may be good for when you have to show some brute force. And having the ability to change between these on the fly really does go a long way to make the combat system never feel dull and very enjoyable to play. In my opinion, the best part of the combat system is how much weight you have behind your attacks. You can sometimes feel the raw power or speed you're outputting on your enemies. This is brought to a crescendo with the heat moves. The heat moves in Yakuza 0 are so varied between the combos you can perform and the items that you find that you can take out your foes in style every time. Performing the heat moves in this game is satisfying, and it helps make the combat so addicting. I would always actively find my way running into fights and not away from them if I wasn't in a hurry. When it comes to the story gameplay, it is a bit simplistic. You will often find yourself running from point A to point B to track down many different people in areas around both cities. Sometimes the gameplay will be mixed up where you'll have to partake in some stealth segments or time segments, but these are pretty few and far between. Really, the meat of the story gameplay comes in exploring different set pieces, in which you explore buildings and beating the absolute crap out of everyone in your way. These segments are really just grade A power trips and honestly are a blast to go through. When you're not in these scenes, you'll spend most of your time exploring Kamurocho and Sotenbori, which is where a lot of the gameplay comes in. When you're going around these areas, pretty much anything can and will happen. From running into random encounters of other street thugs to running into someone who needs help in their woes. It is here where the gameplay of Yakuza really shines. At one moment you are doing a very serious task, only to have the mood shift completely to something goofy and nonsensical. Normally this would be a turnoff for people, but a lot of the goofier stuff is grounded in reality. You also don't have to do the side stuff if you only care about the main story. You can just focus on that. But if you want to take a break and see what the two cities have to offer you, honestly you'll never go bored. A lot of this also can be attributed to the game's amazing writing style. With Yakuza 0 being a prequel to the mainline Yakuza series and taking place almost a decade before the original Yakuza game, the game has a lot to work with in terms of writing. Yakuza 0 shows you the events that happened to Kazuma Kiryu before he became the Dragon of Dojima, and Goro Majima before he became the Mad Dog of Shimano. Due to this aspect, it never ties in too greatly to any major plot points of the mainline Yakuza series, allowing for this game's story to exist inside of a vacuum for most of its main plot points. This game is also aware of that fact and plays on this strength greatly. During the story, you'll constantly switch between both Kiryu and Majima every few chapters to continue on with your story. Some people honestly may not like this because sometimes a major reveal can happen at the end of a chapter, only for it to switch back to the other character, leaving you on a bit of a cliffhanger. This game's story is really set up like a TV drama in this regard, and I honestly didn't mind it too much. I thought it always kept the game feeling fresh and kept me wanting to know more about everything that was happening. I think the best part of the writing is that Kiryu and Majima never really interact with each other in the game and are always just missing each other, but each other's impact on each other's stories is always felt, and it never makes you feel like moving back to the other character's story feel pointless. This can lead to some pretty intense moments later on in the story that I won't get into due to obvious spoiler reasons. I think what also drives home the story would have to be the large cast of characters this game has to offer. While this entry doesn't rely on future Yakuza games to tell its story, you still run into a lot of characters from later titles and get a bit of their origin story to see who they were like before their respective games. This is honestly a real treat for longtime fans of the series, and it does it in such a good way that it won't alienate new fans from starting with this game. You also get some pretty good character development between Kiryu and Nishiki, which makes the events of Yakuza or Yakuza Kiwami much more impactful. And you also get a better understanding as to what caused Majima to become the Mad Dog of Shimano. The game also has a slew of original characters as well, and some of them have honestly become my all-time favorite. The amazing combat and writing of this game is really just one half of the complete package that is Yakuza 0. This game would be nothing without its plethora of side content this game has to throw at you. From your side businesses, to spending the night out in the town, to the people of Kamurocho, there is always something here for you to do. Yakuza 0 probably has the most sub-stories in the series to date. Between Kiryu and Majima, there are 100 sub-stories for you to explore around Kamurocho and Sotenbori. These stories are really just ways to help with the world building in this game, and while on paper a lot of the sub-stories seem repetitive, for example, beat up these people, spy on this person, or get me an item, the writing for them can get pretty deep and helps develop the world around you extremely well. These stories act as a way to set up future plot points for later games too. For newer fans of the series, it'll help provide a lot of context for certain characters' future actions or events that happen in later entries. As for longtime Yakuza fans, it'll help create a root cause as to why something happened or why certain characters act a certain way. Staying on track of sub-stories, the sub-stories in this game can be very humorous with a lot of funny choices to pick from at times, and they can be very serious as well. When completing a sub-story, you normally get an item for your troubles. The better you do in it, the better the item. However, you can trade off a better item for some funnier writing. If you constantly pick the obvious wrong answer, you are rewarded with a situation that, on paper, should never really work, but somehow still does. You, however, do this at the expense of getting a lesser item for your trouble, but honestly, some of the hilarious things that happen make it worth it on its own. Yakuza 0's own story spans about 30 hours in its own right, but both Kiryu and Majima have their own side businesses that they can manage, with each one having their own detailed story. This story in and of itself can run about 10 hours of gameplay if you just focus on that story alone. While Kiryu's business is pretty straightforward, managing real estate, collecting fees, battling with some local billionaires, and hiring a chicken. His name is Nugget. Majima's, on the other hand, is where the real fun is. You run your own cabaret club, and this turns into an idol management-like game and business simulator. I honestly spent way too much time dolling up my star hostess, training her, and then dominating all the other cabaret clubs. Not only are these side businesses addicting, but completing their campaigns not only gives you a steady source of income, but gives you a pretty cool reward to make the combat even more in-depth. If you don't care for sub-stories or your side businesses, there's still plenty of things for you to do alongside of the main story. Around Kamurocho and Sotenbori, there is a plethora of side content for you to indulge yourself in. This can range from bowling, betting on catfights, going bar crawling, to playing shogi, and everyone's favorite, underground fighting rings. All of these side activities are insanely well fleshed out, and you can easily find yourself trying to score a turkey in a game of bowling, or trying to pull off a hat trick to impress your friends in a game of darts. One thing the Yakuza series always manages to impress me with is the series' attention to detail in its surroundings. While the game is not running on the Dragon engine, the power of the PC honestly manages to make the game look so much more crisp and pop out at you even more. Also, there is this strange satisfaction of just watching everyone around Kamurocho go about their own lives. Sub-stories help with this a lot because it makes Kamurocho and Sotenbori feel much more lifelike. You can easily find yourself exploring the streets of both of these areas to discover a lot of hidden things. An example is when I found a colony of stray cats behind a building, or seeing a bunch of people waving money in the air for a taxi to come by and pick them up one by one. It's these little details that really make the game come alive. Another thing that really helps immerse you into the lore of the game's world is how it presents its cutscenes. Yakuza 0 has 3 different forms of cutscenes that it will use for different situations. It will use pre-rendered scenes, still frame scenes with a film noir filter over it, and then in-game cutscenes. While the jump from pre-rendered to gameplay scenes can be very jarring, the choreography never fails to match those of the pre-rendered scenes. New to the PC version allows you to watch these pre-rendered scenes at a locked 60 frames per second, which helps make the transition between pre-rendered and gameplay all the better. That being said, the quality of the pre-rendered scenes are just downright amazing at times, and I will often at times forget I'm playing a video game but instead watching a movie. They do an amazing job of sucking you right in to get invested. What also helps tie this game together would have to be the amazing soundtrack in this game. Yakuza 0's soundtrack has a song that is ready for almost every single occasion, and helps drive the mood home perfectly. You have tracks that will help hit home the gravity of certain situations that you find yourself in, and have tracks that build up to an amazing boss fight that just manages to set the perfect mood for everything to follow. Yakuza 0's soundtrack is honestly something that should be talked about more for everything the music in it manages to convey, and just how great a lot of the tracks are. Tracks such as Pledge of a Demon, Two Dragons, and Interplanetary Spark have become some of my favorite tracks of just how they all set up their respective moods and deliver on them. I could honestly sit here all day and talk about how the game's music helps the game's cinematography and makes many more memorable scenes. As mentioned, Yakuza 0 acts as the series' debut to the PC market, and does this game have a lot to show for it. For reference, my current PC rig is an AMD R9 390 supporting an Intel i7 quad-core processor running at 3.44 GHz with 16 gigs of RAM, and I'm able to run this game fantastically on Ultra at a locked 60 frames per second. No matter what I threw at this game, I never recall the frame rate dipping below 60 frames per second. A stark contrast is the PS4 version's uncapped frame rate. For those of you with beefier rigs in mind, feel free to crank this game up to an 11, as Yakuza 0 can be played at a 4K resolution and go beyond 120 frames per second. Sadly, my rig was only able to clock in between 75 to 80 frames per second. Nonetheless, running this game on Ultra is a nice sight to see. The game was overall much more crisp than that of the PS4 version, and while it's no Dragon engine, the game was still stunning to look around with at times. For those of you running this game on lower end PCs, the game still should run pretty smoothly, and you shouldn't have a problem running this game at 60 frames per second. That is, if you don't mind looking at textures from the PS3 version of the game. From what I have seen, this game runs pretty well across the board, making Yakuza 0 on PC the definitive entry point for the series. The only known issues I've been hearing about the PC version is that it has a slight crashing issue. However, I only had one issue when the game crashed on startup, and after a reboot, I never really ran into the issue again. This may not be the same thing for everyone, however. Thankfully, Sega of Europe is staying on top of this and trying to work out fixes to prevent crashing in the future. Yakuza 0 is an amazing game. It is easily one of the best games I have ever played, and honestly is a contender for one of my favorite video games of all time. There is just something about Yakuza 0 that acts like a celebration of everything I love about video games. From the amazing narrative that kept me on the edge of my seat looking to come back for more, to the best beat-em-up combat in the entire series, to a plethora of side content that will have you sinking hundreds upon hundreds of hours into this game. You seriously have a video game that I can honestly call perfect, or at least near perfect. With all the graphical and technical flaws fixed in the PC version of this game, almost every nitpick I have about this game just pales in comparison to the amazing and great time I had with Yakuza 0. Playing through this game's story again and experiencing everything from all the plot twists and reveals, it reminds me why I love this game, and why I came to fall in love with this series. I don't want to sound redundant, but seriously, Yakuza 0 is honestly an amazing game, and it really took the second time around to make me realize how much of an impact this game had on me. For the longest time, I never thought a game would dethrone Little King's Story as my favorite video game of all time, but here we are near 10 years later, and Yakuza 0 has managed to steal the crown. For the low price of $19.99 and the amount of content and amazing time this game will give you, I honestly can't recommend this game enough. You will get more than your money's worth with this game, and you just may find your next series that you didn't know you would fall in love with. And there we have it! Yep, for my 100th review, I decided to come back and revisit a game that not only changed my views of video games, but was also a review I was not satisfied with the original telling of. I hope you all enjoyed this review, and I want to thank everyone for sticking around through 100 of our reviews. We have many more in the works and hope to keep doing this for years to come. Once again, thank you for everyone who made this possible. Thank you for my patrons on Patreon for supporting these endeavors, and to all my subscribers who keep coming back for more. You guys all make this worth doing. And a personal thank you to all my writers who managed to put up with my shenanigans when working on these reviews. If you're also new to my channel, well hey, got about 100 reviews to catch up on, but I would appreciate it if you subscribe for future reviews, commentaries, let's plays, and more. And as always everyone, seriously, thanks for watching.